leaned across the dinner table, close enough that I could smell the cologne my daughter had probably bought him, and he said it like he was telling me the weather. My mother thinks it would be better if you weren't at the ceremony, just the reception. She's particular about the seating chart. I set my fork down. Not loudly, just set it down. My daughter was sitting right there, right across from me, her hands flat on the table, her eyes doing that thing they do when she's deciding something. My son-in-law, I'll call him that because for 8 months he had that title in this house. He just picked up his wine glass and took a sip like he hadn't said anything unusual, like he'd asked me to pass the bread. I smiled. I don't know why I smiled. 63 years old, and my first instinct was still to smooth things over for everyone else's comfort. My husband used to say I could defuse a bomb with a casserole dish. He wasn't wrong, but he also isn't here anymore. And some things I have had to learn to handle differently. My daughter's name is Noelle. She was 31 that year, sharp as a tack. Ran the property management company her father and I built from 2 rental units and a prayer back in 1994. By the time her father passed, we had 47 properties across 3 counties in central Georgia. Noelle had been beside me through all of it, the lean years, the good years, the terrible year after we lost him. She knew every tenant by name. She knew which roofs needed replacing before the inspectors did. I had handed her the keys, literally and figuratively, and I watched her carry them without dropping a single one. The man sitting at my dinner table that night, I will call him by his name because he doesn't deserve the dignity of a title anymore. His name was Fletcher. Fletcher had come into Noelle's life at a business conference in Atlanta about 2 years prior. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming. Fluent, well-dressed, good at listening just long enough to make you feel heard. He worked in commercial real estate, or so he said. He talked about deals the way some men talk about fishing. Always almost landed, always just out of reach. I had noticed things early, little things. The first time he came to Sunday dinner, he walked through my front door without waiting to be invited past the threshold. Not rude, exactly, just assuming. Like he already knew the layout. He complimented the house the way a buyer compliments a house, not the way a guest does. "Good bones," he said, standing in my hallway. "What's the square footage?" I told him. He nodded like he was filing it away. Over the following months, his presence in our lives expanded the way water expands when it freezes, slowly, then all at once, and with enough force to crack whatever was containing it. He started leaving things at Noelle's office, a blazer on the hook behind her door, a coffee mug in the break room with his initials on it. He began joining her calls with the property accountant, first just listening, then asking questions, then offering opinions about refinancing timelines that nobody had asked for. Noelle told me he was just engaged. Supportive. She used that word, supportive. And I nodded because what was I going to say? That I had watched him move through her professional life like a man memorizing an inventory. She loved him. I could see that she loved him. And so I said nothing. But I watched. The engagement happened quickly. 14 months in, he proposed at a restaurant in Savannah, made a whole production of it, got the other diners involved, had someone filming. Noelle called me from the parking lot, still crying happy tears, and I told her I was thrilled. I meant part of that. The wedding planning started immediately. Fletcher had opinions about everything. The venue, the caterer, the photographer. His parents flew in from Phoenix twice that fall for planning meetings. They were the kind of people who referred to their son's accomplishments in the third person. Fletcher closed a very significant deal last spring, his mother said to me over lunch, patting her mouth with a cloth napkin. He has a real instinct for knowing the value of things. I thought about that line for a long time afterward. His father barely spoke to me directly. He spoke around me, to Fletcher, about things I was presumably supposed to hear. Budget, liability, asset protection. He used those words at a lunch that was supposed to be about floral arrangements. Then came the dinner, the one I started with. It was a Thursday in October. Noelle had made pot roast, which she only does when she wants the evening to feel settled and safe. I brought rolls from the bakery on Elm Street because that's what I always do. Fletcher arrived 20 minutes late, kissed Noelle on the cheek, sat down, and within 45 minutes of conversation, leaned across the table and told me his mother thought it would be better if I weren't at the ceremony. Just the reception, she was particular about the seating chart. I set my fork down. Noelle's hands went flat on the table. Fletcher sipped his wine. And then my daughter looked at him, not at me, at him, and she said, very quietly, "Say that again." He did. He actually repeated it, added something about how his mother had a specific vision for the ceremony and it was important to her to have the people there who were part of her family's tradition. He said it with the tone of a man who has practiced the sentence and decided it was reasonable. Noelle stood up. She didn't raise her voice. That's the thing about my daughter that people who don't know her often misread. She gets quieter when she's serious, not louder. She becomes very still and very clear, the way the air gets before a storm that means it. She said, "My mother built this family. She built the company you've been sitting in on meetings for. She carried everything after my father died. And your mother, who I have met 4 times, has a seating chart concern." Fletcher started to explain. Something about traditions, family dynamics, his mother's anxiety about large events. Noelle picked up her napkin, folded it, and placed it beside her plate. "I need you to leave tonight," she said. "I need some time to think." He laughed. Actually laughed. The small, disbelieving laugh of a man who has never been told no by someone he underestimated. "Noelle." "Tonight, Fletcher." He looked at me then. I don't know what he was looking for. Intervention, maybe? Some maternal impulse to smooth things over. To say, "Now, let's all just calm down." I looked back at him, and I didn't say a word. He left. I helped Noelle clear the table. We washed the dishes together, the way we used to when she was a teenager. Me washing, her drying, not talking about whatever the hard thing was until the kitchen was clean. It's a habit we never broke. I think we both needed the ritual of it. When the last dish was put away, she leaned against the counter and said, "Mom, how long have you known?" "Known what, baby?" She shook her head. That something was off. I told her the truth. I told her about the square footage comment on the first visit, the blazer on her office door, the way his father said asset protection at a lunch about flowers. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He asked me last month to add him to the business accounts, signature authority. I told him we'd talk about it after the wedding." I didn't say anything. She said, "I told myself it was because he wanted to feel like a partner." I still didn't say anything. I just waited. "That's not why, is it?" she said. It wasn't a question. The following week was not quiet. Fletcher called. His mother called. I didn't know she had my number, and I still don't know how she got it. His father emailed Noelle a letter that used the phrase breach of emotional contract, which I had never heard before and hoped to never hear again. Fletcher came to the house on Saturday morning without calling first. He knocked, which at least was something. I answered the door because Noelle had asked me to stay with her that week, and I was there when the knock came. He looked surprised to see me, then he arranged his face into something that was supposed to look sincere. "I'd like to talk to her," he said. "She knows you're here," I said. "She'll come to the door if she wants to." She didn't come to the door. He stood there for a moment, hands in his jacket pockets, and then he said, "You never liked me." I thought about that. I wanted to be honest. "I didn't dislike you," I said. "I just watched you. And I think you knew I was watching." He left without another word. That afternoon, Noelle called her attorney, not a family friend, a real estate attorney, the one who has handled our corporate filings for 11 years, and asked him to review every document Fletcher had touched, every email chain he'd been copied on, every meeting note where his name appeared. It took the attorney's paralegal 4 days. What they found wasn't dramatic in the way you might imagine. There was no forged signature, no stolen funds. What there was a pattern. Fletcher had been in contact with 2 of our largest property investors, men who had done business with my husband and then with Noelle for over a decade, and had been positioning himself as the next operational lead. Not explicitly. He was too careful for explicit. But he had been planting seeds, mentioning in passing concerns about the company's direction, referencing changes he was planning to bring stability, describing himself as someone who understood the portfolio in ways the current management, Noelle, my daughter, my blood, might not. One of the investors called Noelle directly after the attorney reached out. He was embarrassed. He said he hadn't taken it seriously, but he thought she should know. She called me after that conversation. She didn't say much. She said, "Daddy always said watch the hands, not the face." Her father used to say that, about poker originally, but he meant it about people. She sent Fletcher a formal letter that week, ending the engagement, requesting the return of the key to her home, noting specifically that any further contact with the company's investors or accounts would be directed to legal counsel. He responded through his own attorney, briefly, and then went quiet. His parents sent a card. I don't know what possessed them to do that, but they sent a card expressing disappointment and wishing Noelle peace in her future endeavors, like she had left a job, like any of this had been a professional transaction. I suppose for them it had been. The holidays that year were small. Just Noelle and me and her friend Tamsin, who always brings too much wine and not enough dessert, and my neighbor Opal, who has eaten Thanksgiving with us for 6 years, running since her children moved to Portland. We ate too much, watched football, played cards, and nobody said Fletcher's name once. Not because we were avoiding it, just because he didn't belong there, and we all knew it. In February, Noelle restructured the company, added a board of 3 advisors, the attorney, a CPA she'd worked with for years, and a woman named Dorothea who had sold her own property management firm to a REIT in 2019 and knew every angle of the business from the inside. It was something Noelle had been thinking about for a while, she said. The engagement had just made it urgent. I realized, she told me over coffee one morning, that I'd been running it like it was still just ours, like nobody from outside could ever get a foothold. But that's not how it works anymore. She was right. It wasn't how it worked anymore. I thought about what it had cost her. Not the money, not the legal fees, not even the embarrassment of a canceled engagement. Though that part was real, and I watched her carry it quietly for longer than she let on. I thought about what it costs to love someone and then discover that the version of you they loved was mostly your balance sheet, that what they called support was navigation, that what looked like a future was mostly an approach. I think she had known longer than she admitted. I think she made herself not know because she wanted the thing she thought she had. The partnership, the shared life, someone who would sit across from her at a dinner table and mean it. She deserved that. She still does. One evening in March, we were driving back from a property walk. She still takes me along sometimes, especially for the older tenants who know my face. And she said, out of nowhere, I keep thinking about how he said it, like it was reasonable, like telling you to miss my wedding was just a logistics conversation. I didn't answer right away. I watched the road. Then I said, he thought I wouldn't do anything. What do you mean? He thought I'd absorb it, redirect it, make it easier for everyone. I paused. He'd watched me do that for 18 months. He thought that was what I was. Noel was quiet. He didn't know, I said, that I was watching him back. She reached over and put her hand on mine, the way she used to when she was small, and we drove to church on Sunday mornings, and she didn't quite want to go, but she was glad to be with me. We drove the rest of the way home like that. The thing nobody tells you about being a mother is that the hardest part isn't the early years, when everything is urgent and physical, and they need you for every small thing. The hardest part is later, when they're grown and capable and building lives you can only see from the edges, when your job is not to intervene, but to watch, to be present without being in the way, to trust them, and also, quietly, to pay attention. My husband was better at the watching than I was. He had a stillness to him, a patience. I am more inclined to act, but I learned in those 18 months to hold myself still, to keep my eyes open and my mouth closed and let the thing show itself. It showed itself at my dinner table on the Thursday in October over pot roast and bakery rolls. And my daughter stood up. That was enough. That was everything. She didn't need me to stand up for her. She has never needed that. She needed to know I was there, solid and present, and not confused about what I was worth. She needed to see me set the fork down quietly and not apologize for it. So that's what I did. And the rest, she handled herself. I have thought about that Thursday evening more times than I can count. Not with anger anymore. The anger burned off a long time ago. What I think about now is how close it came to going differently, how easily I could have absorbed that moment at my dinner table, redirected it, made it smaller than it was. I had done that for so many years, for so many people, that it had become a reflex. Smooth it over. Keep the peace. Let it pass. But some things don't deserve to pass. And I think, on some level, I knew that the moment Fletcher set down his wineglass and looked at me like I was a scheduling conflict. What I have learned, and I mean really learned, not just understood in theory, but felt in my body, is that how a person treats you when they think you have nothing left to take is who they actually are. Fletcher was charming when he needed to be, attentive when it served him. He knew how to perform warmth the way some people know how to perform competence, convincingly, until the stakes get high enough that the performance slips. The stakes, for him, were my daughter's company. 47 properties, 11 years of tax filings and lease agreements and maintenance logs and relationships with tenants who had known my husband by name. That was what he saw when he looked at our family. And because he thought I was just a grieving widow who had handed the keys to her daughter and stepped back, he thought he could say what he said, and I would let it settle into the table like water into wood. He didn't know what I had been doing for 18 months. He didn't know that watching quietly is not the same as not seeing. Noelle knew. She had learned it from her father, who was the most patient man I have ever known, and she had learned it from the years we spent building something from almost nothing, when you couldn't afford to miss a single detail because one missed detail could cost you everything. That kind of life teaches you to pay attention. It teaches you that intelligence isn't just about knowing things. It's about knowing which things matter and when to act on what you know. She acted. And the way she acted, standing up, speaking clearly, not raising her voice, that was not impulse. That was the result of a woman who had spent years developing the judgment to know when a line had been crossed and the strength to say so without flinching. I think about what it takes to do that, to love someone and still be willing to let the truth be the truth. That kind of courage doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a life lived with a conscience, from choosing, over and over again, to do the right thing even when the easier thing is available. Noelle could have told herself a different story about Fletcher. She had started to. But when the moment came, she chose honesty over comfort. And that choice cost her something she had wanted. That is not a small thing. That is the hardest kind of integrity. Not the kind you display when it's convenient, but the kind you hold on to when letting go would hurt less. I set my fork down that evening and I didn't say a word. But I think that silence, and what it meant that I was not confused about my own worth, that I was not going to make myself smaller to ease his comfort, I think that was the thing that gave Noelle permission to stand up. Sometimes that's all a daughter needs from her mother. Not rescue. Just the reminder that there is nothing to be ashamed of,